Welcome to the Writing with Purpose podcast, where I, Anna Woolliscroft, chat with fellow writers and outdoor enthusiasts about how we can embrace creativity and curiosity to live a life full of adventure that doesn't feel like hard work. I delve into exploratory conversations about my two loves in life, writing and nature connection, as part of my mission to share the well-being benefits they both bring. It's wonderful to have you here today. On this episode of the Writing with Purpose podcast, I'm solo chatting with you about the well-being benefits of reading fiction, the concept of neat, and the power of observation. Hi, and welcome to another series of solo chatting, which is me talking to you over the next 6 episodes of a particular podcast series. And I want to take the time to thank my regular listeners and also hi to any new listeners. I took a huge gamble when starting this podcast because I'm an introvert and I like me time, and it's definitely out of my comfort zone being in situations where there's large groups of people, and also being in the limelight as well. It's not my comfort zone. So thank you very much for listening. I do appreciate it, and the fact that people do listen makes it all the more worthwhile for me to record these episodes. So with that said, I love sharing new insights, new practices, concepts with you, and I feel as though it's part of my purpose, if you like, to share the wisdom that I'm gaining through my creative writing and wellbeing studies, but also the lessons around general health and wellbeing that I pick up from podcasts, books, articles, and my own experiments. If any of you are familiar with human design, which is one of these sort of profiling tools out there. My human design is a generator, and the various aspects of that show me that I am more in my alignment, if you like, when I'm experimenting and when I'm exploring. So why not make something out of doing that, but also sharing it with you so that you can benefit from it as well. And there's nothing more wonderful than the feeling that I get when I see a glint of realization in someone's eye, or when I read a breakthrough that someone has achieved when they send that in an email. It's a great feeling. So thank you very much. And I started this podcast as a platform to speak with other creatives and writers about their experience with writing, nature connection and creativity. So if you've been listening from the start, then you'll know that was kind of where this podcast started. But I do feel as though the content has evolved since the inception of the podcast. And now I'm shifting more to wanting to learn and share about deeper aspects of more wholesome well-being, shall we say. And although my focus is still on journaling and writing as being catalysts for achieving a greater sense of well-being, and from that to live a more fulfilled life, and of course creative practices and connecting with nature help to embody this process. And those are still values in my life, and I kind of try and live to those things. But I do feel drawn to exploring these sorts of topics in greater detail, and it's as though, I suppose you could say, it's like I'm being called to experiment and explore and see where the journey leads me. But on this journey, it's going to be great to share the process and the outcomes on this podcast. So with this in mind, over the next 6 episodes, I will still cover writing, nature connection and creativity, which is what I usually do, and in my newsletter as well. But on top of that, I really want to include reading, curiosity, nutrition and exercise. So as I say, to kind of bring this into more of a wholesome, holistic ways that you can improve your well-being, but writing is still going to be the center of that, and capturing those things in a journal, keeping a notebook, keeping logs of things that happen so that you can bring more awareness to what it is you're doing, but using writing as the catalyst to do that. So I'm still going to be sharing my regular journal prompts with you. And I'd also like to include things like book reviews, podcast reviews, and all that sort of good stuff to help you gain more from these episodes. So also, I think I'll just drop in here just in case anybody's listening, but for future interview episodes, so with the conversations that I have with people, which I always learn so much from, it's a really enriching experience to have conversations with people over this podcast. So I'm looking to speak with more published authors, and that will be across the field of health and well-being as well as fiction. So as you know, if you listen regularly, I'm a fledgling writer, and I learn a lot from speaking with authors who have walked the path before me, and they are experts in their own genre or their profession, which in actual fact is why they've written and published a successful series of sexual whoa, crikey, that didn't sound very good, did it? Published a successful book or a series of successful books, which was what I was trying to say there. That's almost like she sells seashells, isn't it? You can get yourself in trouble by saying things like that. Anyway, moving swiftly on, I am looking for to speak to published authors. So, I would love for you to get in touch with me if this is who you are, if you're an author, if you've published a book, a fiction book, or something that helps with people's well-being. Please do get in touch with me, book an online coffee chat, and you can do that by visiting my Linktree, which is linktr.ee/Anna Woolliscroft, and that's Woolliscroft spelt with 2 O's and 2 L's. Okay, so after that, I got stumbling over my words. Let's get on with today's show. And the first section, writing words for wellness. Okay, so what I would love to include from now on in the writing section is reading as well, because the more you read, the better you are at writing, and the more you write, the better you are at reading. And since starting my master's course in November, I've had to read an awful lot of materials, and these materials have ranged from poetry, essays, critical commentary texts, how-to articles, writing to craft books. So all of the kind of stuff that you really do have to concentrate on. I've also picked up more novel reading, so fiction novels. And what I've noticed, actually, more so over the past couple of weeks, I think, after I've been doing it for a couple of months, is that my mind is becoming more absorbent, and it's almost like, if I can use the analogy of me being like a sponge, and I'm soaking up every idea and every technique and storing all of this good stuff that I'm learning in the fibers so that it's there for when I need it. And this didn't happen for me when I read less. So before, when I used to come to have to read something, and that might be for work, because generally I didn't read for pleasure as such, I used to read as quickly as I could in order to basically tick that box and then move on to the next task or activity. So what was actually happening was I was surface reading with very little knowledge being absorbed. And now I guess you could say, mastering reading. I'm retaining the information a lot more, and I'm loving it. So, I feel as though my own knowledge is growing, and I am absorbing more of the factual stuff, the interesting stuff, and the things that make me more curious. And when I wasn't reading as much, that wasn't happening. So I think there's a lot to be said for the more that we read, the more that we read, the more that we learn, and we're almost creating additional neural pathways in our brain so that we can remember more stuff, more good stuff, and that's a good thing, right? So because of that, I now have a reading intention for every month, and that is to read 2 to 4 books, and preferably 2 fiction books and 2 non-fiction books. And this is on top of my required university reading as well. So as you can imagine, I've got my head in reading literature a lot. And it's having very, very good benefits. So what I'd love to do as well is to share a couple of book reviews, which I'll share at the end of this podcast. But I also want to share now 3 key benefits with you that actually reading fiction can have on our overall well-being. So I say fiction because we all know we can learn from information-based books, self-development books, personal development books, but fiction is often seen as a pleasure activity. So something like dancing, baking or painting, but actually reading fiction, and in fact all of these other pleasure activities do have a lot of well-being benefits, and they are just as important as our professional working and life admin duties. So I think it's important to share these things with you. So number one, reading fiction increases empathy and emotional intelligence. And okay, so what does that mean? Well, research has shown that getting absorbed into fictional stories can improve our ability to relate to others and see things from different perspectives. And that's quite important because sometimes we can get so stuck in our own opinions and assumptions about things that we don't always see things from somebody else's perspective. And that's when arguments can happen and conflict can happen, whereas everybody's entitled to their own opinions, and those opinions are formed from experiences and a lot of other factors. So it is a really, really good trait, maybe trait's the wrong word here. It's a really good characteristic to be able to see things from other perspectives. And a great story it has the ability to transport us, to step into somebody else's shoes where we can experience their thoughts and feelings and motivations, and that becomes clearer as the story plot builds as we read, and then we connect with the characters. And this helps with compassion, empathy, and, our emotional intelligence skills, which are all benefits for our relationships with anybody, personal relationships, family relationships, social interactions that we have in daily life. So our daily reality and interactions. Number two, reading fiction reduces stress and improves relaxation. And we all need more of that. So engaging with an engrossing novel or story provides an escape from the stresses of daily life. And this act of immersing ourselves into another world just kind of allows our minds to detach from rumination and worries, for things that happen in the external world. So reading provides a mental break, if you like, from those external pressures, and it can leave us feeling refreshed. And I'd go as far as saying even energized as well, if you're really into the story. And it helps because there's going to be some of those feel good chemicals that help our brain with those sort of positive vibes as we read as well. And fiction reading, it's actually research has found to lower our heart rates and relax muscle tension. So it's very similar to other stress reducing activities such as meditation and soaking in the bath. So what I would say here is reading is not a waste of time, which is how I used to tend to view reading, or certainly pleasure reading, as a bit of a waste of time. I could be doing something more beneficial like working for a client, but we all know that we need to focus on our self-care. And finally, number three, fiction improves our imagination, creativity and cognitive function. So the vision, the imagery, if you like, that a riveting narrative creates as we read helps to push our brains to be more imaginative, and that helps with problem solving as well. So as a reader, when we read, we visualize the story world and we connect with different plot points. We make certain assumptions about things, and, particularly detective novels and, that sort of thing, or romance novels, we try and predict what's going to happen. And that helps us with this creativity aspect, with this problem solving aspect. And these are all challenging the cognitive processes that help to exercise our minds, if you like. So reading's almost like flexing our brain as a muscle, our mental muscles rather than just our limbs and our physical muscles. So it's a great exercise for the mind. And some research indicates that fiction can even slow down intellectual aging. And I really like the sound of that. I don't really want to be one of these people that forgets and becomes a little bit slow at sort of grasping things. I'd rather my brain carry on working for as long as possible in in a positive capacity and intelligent capacity. So just to summarise, really, the reading, whether it's exploring human nature behaviours in a psychological thriller, transporting us to new places and experience in science fiction or fantasy, or maybe transporting us back to history or in the future somewhere, or even giving our brains a cognitively demanding workout, reading fiction provides a wealth of well-being benefits. So I would love to invite you to carve out more time to just get lost in a great story, because it enriches us both physiologically and emotionally. And, let's have more of that, is what I say. So let's come on to the journal prompts for writing words for wellness section. And I encourage you to have a go at these prompts. You can pause me now, or you can write them down, or just come back to this podcast, make a note of the time and come back to it when you have a little bit more time to dedicate to this. So what genre of fiction books do you enjoy reading? Now, just take some time and free write about your early memories of reading and the stories that are most memorable to you, and just see where that leads you. You'd be surprised as to what you probably remember that you had perhaps forgotten about until this prompt has just kind of nudged a little memory recall there. And what was the first book you remember reading? Something that you chose to read, might I add there, and not something that was prescribed by school or your parents. So what was it that you chose to read? And also have a think and reflect on a specific book over the last few years that has left a lasting impression on you, and what lessons or insights did you gain from reading the book? And take that a little step further and ask, why do you think the content was so powerful? And I love these kind of things because, we are drawn to reading certain material, whether it's fiction, whether it's professional, whether it's academic, because of some deeply rooted desire that we have. So, let's have a go at those prompts and, see what happens for you. Great stuff. So moving on to nature and discovering a nourishing connection. And as I record this episode, and I'm looking outside right now, spring is well and truly underway. I've been seeing snowdrops and daffodils everywhere, and wildlife. Everything's just waking up. Now is a time of renewal, and I love it. To be fair, I love every season because there's always something new happening. There's always something different to observe. But anyway, I've taken some incredible photographs while on runs and walks, and these include budding flowers, inquisitive birds, bright red mushrooms, which I think are called elf cups, and there's different varieties: red, ruby, or scarlet. I can't remember which ones these were. My friend Dawn would know. She's brilliant at deciphering anything to do with plants and flowers and bird songs. Anyway, these mushrooms were just beautiful. Probably not something that you would eat. Red sometimes means deadly, so I'll will not attempt to pick and try any. And also frogs. I just wanted to mention some frogs. So I was running down the local salt line the other day with my partner. It was in the night, so we had a night torch, head torch on, and there was frogs everywhere. We must have passed a couple of dozen frogs, and they actually were very camouflaged on the pathway, so I really hope that I didn't actually squish any. But just a note to yourself, it's frog season, it's toad season. Be careful where you step, people. You don't want to be squishing a humble frog trying to find his way to the pond to breed. Anyway, digressing as I often do, why am I sharing this? Well, really, it's to encourage you to embrace the power of observation. And observation, or taking notice, is one of the 5 steps to well-being, which is has been identified by the New Economics Foundation on behalf of Foresight. Now, I'll put a couple of links in the show notes in case you want to read a little bit more about this, but I shall come back to some of these 5 steps to well-being in future podcasts. But what it's kind of saying here is, if you can get good at taking notice of the things around you, and then how you feel about those things, things, what it can actually do is help you understand the triggers and feelings of stress and anxiety, or equally help you to understand what helps you to feel better. And according to the charity Mind, there are some studies that have shown that savouring the moment can also help you to feel more positive about life. And I'm a huge believer in this, that connecting with nature and just, really savouring the moment, bringing your awareness to the moment, living in the present, all of that kind of stuff really does help you to just improve your own well-being. And since I've taken the time to slow down and connect with my surroundings, I definitely can sense when I'm not firing on all cylinders, and somehow it just helps me to know when I need to rest and recuperate, which I've had to do actually over the past couple of days. For some reason, I've been waking up and just have not been feeling alive. I've been falling back to sleep again in the morning, in the evening. It's been very difficult to keep my eyes open, and that's happened a couple of times in the middle of the day as well. So, when that kind of thing happens, you kind of need to listen to your own body, listen to what it's saying to you, and actually think, yes, I need to rest and recuperate. But until you start to notice these things, we can become a little bit numb to it. So I encourage you to take notice, and I've got some prompts for you to help with that. So right now, if it's safe to do so, take a look around you and focus on what you are drawn to. What in your sight are you drawn to? Or is there anything actually that you can hear that you feel drawn to? And it could be anything. This could be absolutely anything. There's no right or wrong. But when you're aware of what you're being drawn to, take out your notepad and a journal and write down what it is that you see and describe it in detail. Think about the colour, the texture, the size, anything that's going on with what you are drawn to. And also, again, take that a step further and ask, why do you think you were drawn to this particular thing? And asking this question, why, always helps you to go deeper, always helps your thinking to go deeper, always kicks in your intuition a little bit more, so that you can gain more from what it is that you are reflecting on. And also, what does this thing, this object, whatever it is, what does it remind you of? And see if you can connect anything that you've been drawn to it because it perhaps reminds you of something. And getting used to this sort of observation and taking notice of things really does help us to become more curious about life. It helps us to ask more questions and being more creative, and immersing in nature with this process. It just kind of helps you to step away from ruminating inside your own head about insignificant problems and thoughts. It does, and it helps you to just feel more alive when you're connecting with the beauty of what's around you. So, and without a shadow of a doubt, creativity helps you to enjoy life in Technicolor. Moving on to creativity section, I add. Actually, Technicolor, is that still a thing? Am I showing my age here? Is there something that Netflix or is Technicolor a thing? Let me know in the comments. Send me an email. I don't know. Maybe that's something that happened 10 years ago and I'm just way behind technology with this. But what I'm trying to say, anyway, bringing it back, is being creative can be any number of things aside from being a creative. So when you think about decorating cakes, single ingredient cooking, playing poo sticks off the top of a bridge, meal planning, even going as far as, researching and switching energy providers. All of those things are examples of you being creative, because when you think about it, when you're doing those things, you are thinking actively, you are moving actively, you are conjuring up something, anything, and by doing that you are being creative. And trying to get the point of this across, I think, of being creative, thinking actively, moving actively, and this is instead of passively just sitting there, watching the television, calling for a Just Eat That is a passive thing rather than creating something in the kitchen where, all of your senses are involved. You can do it with other people. It's far more creative than just picking up the phone and ordering a pizza, as is, aimlessly scrolling on your phone. Fine if you've got an interest in something and you want to Google to research those sorts of things, but scrolling on social media just really is one of the worst things that you can do for numbing your brain. Anyway, don't get me started. In this section, I wanted to share something that I learned this week on the Know Thyself podcast. And the host, Andre Ducombe, I hope I've pronounced his name right, he had a conversation with health expert Max Lugavere, where and he is a health expert, in particular about nutrition, and they touched on a super interesting conversation about ultra foods. Don't get me started on those either. Nutrition in general, sleep and exercise, and it was really, really informative. But something that I heard on the podcast that it was actually quite obvious when you think about it, but it's the concept of NEAT, which stands for non-exercise activity thermogenesis, or also known as non-exercise physical therapy, which is actually a lot easier to say. So I will refer to this as non-exercise physical activity. But this NEAT acronym refers to the process where we aren't purposely exercising, so we're not partaking in something such as swimming, running, lifting weights, for example, where we're energetically, purposefully exercising. But it's something that we're doing where we're still burning calories and moving. So in other words, it's anything that requires a level of exertion, but not just sitting still on the sofa. So examples might include vacuuming, washing the car, digging soil over in the garden, hanging up the washing or ironing. So as you can imagine, it's anything that's helping your limbs to move, or your body to move in general. And even when I first listened to this, the guy was explaining that his leg. His leg moved quite a lot all the time, and I'm one of those people. I don't know if you relate to this, if you're excited about something, or, maybe you're thoroughly engrossed in doing something and then you realize that your leg is bouncing all over the place. But that counts as movement because, at the time your muscles are contracting and working, even though there's minimal effort in that, and you're certainly not classing that as an exercise routine. But, that's movement, and that's actually burning off a few calories. So with this in mind, the next journal prompts, I would love to invite you to think creatively about your NEAT activities. So I'm trying to combine creativity here with exercise, and get you just to think a little bit deeper about that. And I invite you to keep a log over the next few days, because once you have a log over some of this activity, there's then an opportunity to explore how you could potentially introduce more of this non-exercise physical activity into your routine. And I'm thinking about things here such as maybe investing in an adjustable desk so that you could stand for 5 minutes while walking, while you're working every hour, maybe cleaning your outside windows more often, or washing your car instead of taking it to the paid car wash down the road. Something that is going to actively get your limbs moving, get your blood flowing, oxygen flowing around your body, burning off more calories. Actually, talking about this has just reminded me of someone that I knew. I can't think who this was, although I have actually mentioned this to quite a few people over the years, but somebody that I know from business networking. She used to have one of those, well, she probably still does, have one of those miniature trampolines in her office, one of those which is probably maybe a meter in diameter. And she used to say that to take a break every couple of hours or so, to force herself from taking a break, she would go and have a jumping session on this trampoline. And I always used to think that was a brilliant idea. I'd often forget about it, but it was something that I thought, I must get one of those because I really fancy doing that. So yeah, that's just another idea that's something that gets your blood flowing, your muscles moving a little bit more. So here are your journal prompts for creativity. Always keep a journal or a notebook handy, and when you notice a neat activity unfolding, make a note of it. So, as I mentioned, if you could try and do this for about a week so that you've got some regular data. It's easier to refer back to and reflect on. So make a note of it, and then just in that moment, describe a sentence about what you are doing and what body parts are active. And then once you have this log for a week or so, see if you can identify any similar activities that you can incorporate into your day, or to increase the frequency of some of what you've already logged, of what you can do more of. And I must add here, while non-exercise physical activity is certainly not a replacement for purposeful exercise, as you log your activity, it helps again with this sort of observation, this taking notice of things. You become more aware of the sedentary and non-active parts of your day. And then hopefully that will encourage you to consciously bring more energized activity into the equation, into your equation, and just generally help with your overall well-being in very, very small steps. Actually, it doesn't take much to actually increase some of these things. So I think what I'd like to end on, I did say I would start to share some book recommendations, and we all have our favourite genres, but now I'm definitely starting to realise the importance of mixing up my reading, the forms of reading, so poetry, magazine articles, books, essays, scholarly articles, and genres, because and this goes for physical books, podcasts, audiobooks, however you kind of digest this reading material, whether it's with your eyes, whether it's with your ears, possibly even whether it's sort of whether you're watching something and listening to it at the same time. But my intention for sharing a couple of books on each episode moving forward is to encourage you to read widely and enjoy the incredible stories and insight that's available to us across multiple genres. It's the same as anything. If we get used to using one thing more, it starts to become a little bit more, it starts to become numbed a little bit. And, we do over time getting less enjoyment and benefit out of it. So, there you go. And so the first recommendation is Stephen King's On Writing. Now, if you follow me on social media, I've spoken about this book several times before. And this is something that I've had on the bookshelf for quite some time, but I only picked it up to read because a couple of fellow students had recommended reading it as part of the master's course. And the book itself is actually part memoir and part masterclass. So it starts with King's childhood, which is very hilarious. Some of the antics that he gets up to with his brother. His older brother are hilarious, but he talks about how he got into the genre that he writes for, so sort of supernatural, sci-fi, and then more of the horror scene. And the book then leads into a kind of masterclass on techniques for writing, of how the process that he uses, shall we say. So even if you're not a writer, it's a very, very engaging book because it's a bit of a memoir for him. And as he's describing some of the techniques that he uses, he still talks about the experiences and in his own journey. So it is a fascinating read, and we have to admit that he is one of the most successful authors of our current time. The other book I want to recommend, which I actually listened to on Audible, but it is available as a physical book as well, is Megan C. Hayes' The Joy of Writing Things Down. Now, I don't know how I came across this book, but I'm certainly glad that I did, because it's another one of those books that I wish I'd written. There's so many of those these days, but of course my goal is to take all of the good stuff out of all of these books and just expand on them so that there's even more good stuff for people to read. But she definitely drills down into the benefits of writing and what that brings to your well-being. But how she does that is by delivering a step-by-step guide of different types of writing and reading as well. But different types of writing in the main for pleasure and well-being. She focuses a lot on journaling, but also different types of journaling. And there's a lot of different types of journaling out there. It doesn't just have to be something where you write about what's happened during the day, or something where you focus on perhaps a bit of a challenging experience to try and work through. There was lots of hints and tips and practical writing prompts packed into this book. So 2 completely different books that I would recommend. And that kind of wraps up today's episode, but I would like to leave you with a term that I coined when catching up with my good friend Alistair on Monday, and that is brain effort. And I'd like to ask the question, how much brain effort do you put into your day, into your work, your time with family and friends, into cooking, into thinking about your future self? How much brain effort do you apply to daily life? And you can apply this brain effort concept to absolutely anything that you do, and I invite you to do so. And if that resonates with you in any way, please do send me an email to hello@writingwithpurpose.co.uk, or leave a comment on this podcast. I love nothing more than actually reading some of the enlightened ideas or things that you come up with based on just a bit of a word or a prompt. So I will end as normal with a quote, and this week it's from Diane von Furstenberg, and that is, "You are the one that possesses the keys to your being. You carry the passport to your own happiness." And for me, that's a very powerful quote, because when you think about yourself as a passport to your own happiness, where are you going to go? What are you going to do? What are you going to try next? What's not working? Where do you not want to go back to ever again because you've experienced something that was unhelpful or a little bit icky? So, I will leave you on that note. I would love you to sign up to my bi-weekly newsletter if you haven't already, where I do share similar content to this with lots of journaling prompts. And I'm also going to be writing a short story in my newsletters moving forward. So this is going to help me with my practice of being a fledgling fiction author, and I would love to get your feedback on that. And as always, please subscribe and leave a review so that it helps other people to find the podcast and gain some benefit from the words of wisdom. So thank you very much for listening. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for listening to today's Writing with Purpose podcast. Having conversations with fellow writers or adventure enthusiasts brings 2 of my biggest loves in life together, writing and nature connection. I've been a copywriter and content creator for 23 years, but my passion is writing for well-being, and I'm on a mission to share the benefits that putting pen to paper has for personal wellness with as many people as possible. If you want to learn more about writing for your well-being and journaling techniques, please connect with me in my Facebook group, Journaling with Anna.